All right. So, Jeremy, maybe you can unmute because you're sponsoring this call.
Right.
So this is the first um, global inner-intensive call that we're holding during this break. And um, when we go into playlisting and construction, um, it's now time to get creative and to start to construct. So Jeremy, I received a message from Fiona, and you were the first one who was getting excited about constructing. And in the course of conducting trainings online and live, there are some people who are able to go into this more readily. So the reason why we're doing like a 1-year process is to give people time to take in all the all the theories, all the philosophies, and then when we go into the studio, this is when we start to apply. So that's why you're sponsoring this call, and we're starting with an Ableton conversation, which isn't necessarily introductory. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to go over different platforms. So I'd like to go into your basic questions, the ones that you sent through Fiona, and they had to do with, for example, rest and digest. So that's actually a good opening because it gives us something to work with. But then you also talked about the platform. So I think the point in the online journey is to be able to not have to talk about many things all at the same time, which we sometimes do in the short trainings. Like in Singapore, I covered basics. And so I would show something for 30 seconds or a minute would be long. And a lot of those would be interesting. It is true that people can research on this, watch videos. That can happen, and that's useful. But one of the things that we can do is to think about how does this apply to an inner dance framework as well. So I will give the mic over to you. Could you maybe give your questions, your curiosities, interests?
Yeah. So thanks, Brian. So yeah, I think what I was really curious about after I read some of the transcripts, I know that you've been doing a little bit of research and there are records of people using the rest and digest playlist. So I was so intrigued by, oh wow, like mm, what kind of music, what kind of frequencies, what kind of sounds can we use to create an effect or to heal condition. So I want to understand like what has been the experiments you've been doing with music and what are some of the correlations you've arrived to, so that when we come into the playlisting process, things can be a little bit more intentional. Like let's say if we have a client who's dealing with a certain headache, a migraine, what are some of the what's the thought process behind creating a playlist that can help them through this process or this procedure. So yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think that's really accurate. Like that question can lead to a lot of structure. And I think in inner dance, we're ready to go into this slowly. So right now we're going to be introducing platforms. And when I constructed Rest and Digest, I used 2 major platforms, which are workstations. I used 2 different ones. I didn't have to, but because I had to shortcut what I knew best on certain techniques, then it was faster. So I used Logic Pro and I used Ableton. In the beginning, I used Ableton and then I used Logic Pro. But if we study Ableton, we wouldn't actually need to transfer to Logic Pro because what Ableton can do, Logic Pro can do. Some people, they prefer Logic Pro because it's more intuitive based on the user interface. But Ableton has a lot more capabilities, and I'd like to cover that. I think anyone can learn either, so I leave it to people to choose. Logic Pro would only work on Mac-based platforms, so we need to look at alternatives to Logic Pro for Windows users like you. But I might bring up Logic Pro because it will show some of the things that I did with Rest and Digest. So I'm happy you're bringing up the concept of how do we say this? The feedbacks, because the feedbacks need to meet the construction. Like this is where we go into a structuralism, where we look at what can heal certain conditions physically and mentally. So it's important to start gathering data. So I did release the PDF that looked at the Rest and Digest elements. What's interesting is this playlist doesn't always work the same way for everyone. I'm happy, for example, Siegfried is here because he shared Rest and Digest with someone, and we got feedback from that. So let me draw out like a feedback that I got from you look for it, you scroll without a oh here. So someone listened to it. So that was good. She fell asleep into it. It was gentle. She was able to focus at work. But there's this other lady who had a whole different experience. Tried listening to the playlist. Okay. To be honest, I had to stop the playlist because it caused me quite a bit of unrest, contrary to the title. So honestly, when I constructed this playlist, I thought it was more gentle than I thought. But then when I checked and balanced it after I'd sent it out, I realized that when you listen to it from different speaker systems, certain trigger mechanisms that I was hiding starts to jump out. So I started to get a little bit insecure, but I realized that maybe those trigger mechanisms actually hold a role. So I'm in a trust base because for me, the trigger mechanisms are important when we bring people into the dream state, because that's where some people are asked to look at certain things that they can't usually look at. Go ahead, Sigrid. Yeah.
May I just add one feedback I got from one guy, also from Germany. He said, I couldn't understand that. Like when the walking, there was like some footsteps and some shooting, and I didn't even realize because I was listening like more like 4, 5, 6 times, but I was falling asleep, so I did it during the sleep time. But then he said he couldn't listen to that because that was kind of triggering him totally different. Yeah, the same reason. And he mentioned specifically the footsteps and the shooting.
Yeah. So I was hiding that, and I thought I hit it a lot deeper. I'll explain where that came from later, and that might make sense to you because it needs to be within the construction. Yeah. So then I was quite surprised because when I just yesterday I got feedback from, let's look for sound as medicine. So here are really conservative people who are quite not easy to bring into inner dance. They normally don't go into inner dance. There's this one in particular. She's a doctor who's also into psychiatry. And for the very first time, she actually experienced lucid dreaming. So she was sleeping, and then her mind woke up while she was sleeping, and she was transported through time and space, back and forth. So this one is a unique feedback, I feel. Then I got this other feedback from the other doctors who are not easily triggered into inner dance, and then they were explaining that it's very effective for them based on people who had insomnia. It's putting them to sleep right away. This particular playlist solves everything. So these are people preparing to look for what to bring to their patients. So they're already doing it for the entire families of the other doctors, and they're getting the same results. So here's the first secret that I'm going to share. Rest and digest is actually anything is possible. Okay. I took out the words that were in anything is possible, and then I merely left the music, and I raised the more relaxing vibrations using certain instruments to hide the trigger mechanisms, and I added more white noise. So let's start with that. I constructed all of that. No, I constructed some of that in Ableton, and then I moved things into Logic Pro. So I'm going to bring up Logic Pro just to show you how much control we have over the digital audio workstation. So here's the elements in anything is possible. And I'm sure a lot of you have used these already. Wait, let me make sure. Oh, I'm not actually sharing the screen. So let me share the screen. And let me do a test just to make sure that we can hear together. So I'm gonna press play and let me know if you can hear it. You heard the sound, okay. So this is Logic Pro, and over here at the browser on the left, we're able to control what we're gonna be listening to. So when I press S, we're isolating or putting solo. So we're only hearing that one sound. Okay, so we're gonna be looking at layers. The layers of anything is possible would be number one, the verbal layers.
Three-dimensional world where everything has
That's how it started, yeah. And then all together sounds like this. So this is a very, very thick playlist. The more relaxing parts would be decent. For some reason, sometimes it doesn't come out there. So these are just synthesizer sounds that are running underneath or over the more intense ones. All right. So over here, this is me speaking, but what I actually did was I reversed myself speaking. I don't know if people recognize that, but it's my voice, but it sounds like light language because all I did was I made it go backwards. Okay. But sometimes I would follow that with me speaking. Yeah, no, not that, but the actual speaking words. Maybe it's the consciousness. It's a way. So when I made this, I was interested in the language parts of the brain getting activated, and then bringing that into other dimensions. So the intense aspect of this particular playlist is over here. And these are basically both Ableton instruments and also synthesizers that I had in the studio. So we listened to that in solo. It's very intense. If I wanted to lessen the intensity, I would just lower the volume here. So I can negotiate what they would be in accordance to everything else. So I wanted these as trigger mechanisms that would sometimes hold rhythm, frequency, and so on and so forth. Let's study the elements that I put here. So here, I already demonstrated the synthesizers, which are very delta and relaxing. So what Siegfried is pointing out that we can study together is what would those trigger mechanisms do that are noise-based. So he talked about the footsteps, and you talked about what else is there? The war sounds. I did that intentionally.
Shootings or
Shooting.
war
Yeah,
sounds.
the war. I got the war and everything else here. So these are Logic Pro sound effects. So let's say I wanted to look for sound effects. This actually comes from Final Cut Pro, which is more of a video editing tool, but it cross-references here. So let's say war or battle. I don't know where I got it, but it came from somewhere here. And then let's say footsteps. It could be footsteps like in the forest, with I don't know, jungle or nature. Okay, so all of those are spread out here, so that this playlist is actually filled with a lot of trigger mechanisms that are varied. Hummingbird, seagull, bird sparrow, boat canoe, boat drive, boxing speed bag, brushing teeth, purring cat. Because when you look at the title of the playlist, the theme was anything is possible. And because this was my intro contribution to the innerintensive, I wanted to create an activation of the default mode network in the brain to bring them into dream states. And for those in the innerintensive, you know how effective this has been. Either people have used this live or have laid down to it alone. So there has been a myriad of feedback. So because I appreciated all of the feedbacks there, I wanted to experiment what it would do if I simply erased all these voice parts. So what I'm gonna do now is gonna open the rest and digest.
Just one question regarding to the trigger mechanisms. I assume because this German guy who mentioned these footsteps and the shootings, intuition came to my mind. It might not have been his own life experience, the war, because he's too young for that, but maybe his father or parents or his history in his lineage has gone through this fear of death, being in war. So my assumption is, I don't know if it's correct or not, that some sounds which are stored in our systems based on our, I don't know to call it past lives or lineage of experiences.
This is our general interest. This is why we're doing innerdance or the work at all. We're interested in the trigger mechanisms that allow people to look at the, like what's hidden. So that we we either can hide them or we can make them overt. So non-psychological, there could be like biological triggers. So this is a biological trigger because it doesn't have a psychological device. But when you take something that actually has possible meanings, then I think what we're interested in is to allow the healing of both biological and psychological elements. So
may I just add one thing? Sorry to interrupt you. Just last one, which pops up now. In Mexico, we did we had a training, and I used like the normal, let's say, sequential music, and then with another speaker, I went with the My Noise app to different people individually, and with 3 people, I had a phase. I got into this Arctic wolves, like different barking and
like howling,
and with one girl from where is she? She's from Brazil, and I was really around her head, like moving this for a minute or 2 or something like that, and then moved on. And later on, she said, "Wow, something very strange happened," because she was so afraid of dogs, like a phobia of dogs, really was triggering all her life. And now this is solved. She said, "Now this is gone."
That's it. That's totally it.
Just these 2 minutes of exposing her on another layer, because there was still the other music going on, which was more soft and more nice and everything. And
I think we're coming nearer and nearer one of the main objectives of the work that we do, desensitization is a big part, right? So if any of you have tried out the Josh playlist, which is called REM State Entrainment 2, I used this track where there's a lot of children laughing and running around, like in the background. That's in the very first sleep playlist that was ever made. I actually took that from a long track that I found in YouTube that's designed to desensitize dogs to the sound of children playing, which owners can use in order to help that when the dogs get exposed to children, that they don't get triggered, that they don't get angry, they don't hurt the children. So in innerdance, this is what the triggers do, that when we tap into the autonomic nervous system, the whole purpose for that is to give people a chance to activate a response mechanism that might have been stressful in the past to then go into a more non-dual state. So we can either access that while we are awake or while we are sleeping. So the sleep playlist would be very interesting because we're only studying this now. So we're doing research, we're getting feedbacks. How much is enough? And when is it either too much or too low? And I think we need to increase our sensitivity as to what would be the Goldilocks zone. And that might be very technical in terms of studying these programs, because some people will be using their headphones. There's so many different qualities. Some people will be using the speakers from their iPhones. Some people might be putting in high fidelity speakers. And without us expecting it, some of these trigger mechanisms might jump out. So when I use Rest and Digest, sometimes I don't hear any of these trigger mechanisms. And then I think when I was editing, I didn't actually hear them anymore. So I thought they were absent. But then when I listened to it once, one evening, I was so shocked that, oh my God, it's so loud. Because I used it within another speaker system. So that got me a little bit concerned. But because I'm interested in the desensitizing mechanism, for me, rest could either be escape, I don't want to look at it, or rest could be through pure observation. So I think it depends on how we introduce these to our clients and friends and family. My mom's been using the Rest and Digest. She doesn't have any problem. She's totally just going there. So I really like that this conversation is coming up now as we study the mechanism. All right, yeah.
Question, would you say it's necessary, it's a condition to say if you want to stimulate these triggers, that at the same time you co-activate also the parasympathetic nervous system, saying, okay, there is a part relaxing myself, my system, so that I can, like having the cat like doing this nice noise when you fall like really into this frequency. And at the same time, there might be some dangerous part. So the co-activation would be neutralizing itself, or is it more that one part of the mind is consciously aware of this, let's say, barking or shooting or whatever it is, but realizing somehow, oh, it's not dangerous in that context?
Yes, but because we're largely speaking to the subconscious here, that would slowly allow that to translate to the conscious mind. A lot of these sounds need to be in the beginning subliminal. So it's really about balance. We have to understand how to harmonize these. And I don't want to be the only one to do it. I'm using these examples so that as you all study the platforms that will be ideal for you, I would love for you to look for also what's right, so that we can spread out different variations that are specific to either specific disease patterns, psychological or emotional conditions, and cultures, age groups, right? Okay, so let's go to the platforms just so we can familiarize. I guess it probably has been useful for you to even just look at this, that I've sent this out and now you can see how, wait, sorry, I'm not sharing the screen, how it was even it was even made. So this is where I balanced it out. I like to use Logic Pro because of the intuitive interface, especially when it comes to automation. So automation means this. When I press this button, one of the most powerful things I have access to is the volume control. I can easily balance the volume control. When I go to Ableton Live, this automation is also there. So this is to use Ableton during live DJing sessions. But when I press the tab button, I instantly go into the arrangement view, which is similar to Logic Pro, where I can see the whole timeline. It just doesn't look as pretty. The colors and, it just looks a little bit more mechanical, but it does exactly the same thing. So that when I press record, it will start recording whatever is happening, and we'll try that out later on. So to Jeremy, because you're going to be using this to look for the automation mode, you need to go to view and press automation mode. And then here, you need to first go to the mixer and then track volume. So you can do the same thing where you can drag actual songs here. You can drag actual songs, you can drag sounds, you can drag instruments, and you need to be able to control the volume so that when you negotiate balance, now that we're understanding what balance actually means, you can do it very quickly, very intuitively, right? So let's go back to Logic Pro because there are examples here. Actually, maybe anything is possible is more useful to study, which could also still be effective in sleep, but not the same as rest and digest. Let's look at the kind of things that I've inputted here. These were the wait, let me make sure the sound, the sound sounds good. This is mostly synthesizers and Ableton instruments. This was the synthesizers. These were the sound effects. Here it's like motorcycle. And then synthesizers again, more noises, and like voices. Voices are trigger mechanisms. So you do want to study verbal mechanisms because they activate general regions of the brain that interconnect, namely the temporal, parietal, and occipital lobe, so that comprehension can occur, meaning deeper understanding of life elements can occur rather than just basic sounds. But you wanting to trigger as many dimensions as possible, you trigger frequencies, you trigger noises, you trigger words, then you can allow for all these dimensions to be looked at all at the same time. So I guess you can see what a platform is. A platform is where you can bring multiple systems together. So I want to describe how many platforms you can put in. Okay, so here's an introduction to Ableton. This is the browser on the left. And particularly, I am using Ableton Live. This is the latest. I have the suite. Don't need it if you don't wish to start out with the complex. Jeremy has the Ableton Lite, which is the simplest version. Doesn't give you that many instruments, but it's enough to start out with. Okay, how can I get rid of this? Okay, so here's the browser. You can construct your own categorization possibilities. So here I just named it as brain states or neural oscillations, or just because I would be able to interact with an innerdance framework, and then I just defined what delta might mean for me. So my delta would be very relaxing elements. So here I can shop around for the different sounds. I can move through all the instruments that I have available. And they show up here primarily because when I was shopping around for instruments or sounds, I would check them all out one at a time. And then when I feel, okay, this sounds like beta, I would double click and then I can put a color there. So I say, oh, okay, I like this. It sounds more, this sounds more like it's got a rhythm. So rhythmic elements I normally put into beta band. So I would color that blue. So now it's going to show up here in the blue parts. So I have my whole categorization lined up so that when I shop around, I don't need to understand any of these, but when I want variety, I can simply drag and drop representations quickly here into the workstation. If anyone has any questions that come up, just go ahead. I'll just keep going with the introduction to Ableton. Okay, so here is where you can line up your instruments and your clips, your samples. So right now, what I have lined up to explain it to you, Typhon is an instrument that I have here in the floor, and I'm able to route that through an audio interface. So that could be anything from, let's say I'm learning an instrument, it could be a harp, a flute, and if I had a microphone, I can record that instrument here. It could be the voice. The voice is going to be very, very important. So I can record myself speaking. That unto itself would be its own instrument. So when you want to construct an instrument, you start here at the empty part, you double click, and then you say, I can insert an audio track or a MIDI track. A MIDI track would be when you're wanting to use, let's say, a MIDI instrument. Jeremy has one. An audio track could be anything from an actual song, right? Let's say I want to drag and drop a song. Let's say womb sounds that I normally put in. Say I wanted to put that in, I would drag and drop that easily here. Oh, it's not doing it. Wait. Okay, it's slow. My computer is a little bit slow this morning. I have so many programs that are open, but anyway, theoretically, that's what it does. You can drag and drop a song there. Maybe it's because it's a big file and it takes a while. So that's one possibility. So here, as soon as I maybe get interested in an instrument, then I will drag that here, and then now it's there. Okay, and then over here, down here, this is where I can play with the instrument. So in the beginning, if I try to press my keyboard, I don't hear anything. That's because I haven't activated the instrument. So I need to press this button here, right? And now I can activate the instrument. I'm not hearing anything because my main volume control is off. So that's the instrument. That's what's called an instrument. So I can change the sound through the different parameters that are given. It's almost like changing a sound changes the energy, changes the vibration. And this one's quite simple. So it's really about selection and combination. First, you really just go shopping using your body as a resonator. Okay, do I need that? You know, what's missing right now? So I was giving the example, for example, where these are my delta instruments. I took some time to categorize that. These are my theta instruments, a little bit less relaxing, but still instrument-based. Well, a little bit more triggering, but not too much. Okay, alpha would be my arpeggios, you know, that play series of notes. Let me show you a possible arpeggiator. There's this one called Dr. Chaos. Let's look for that, just so I can demonstrate what an instrument could look like. So here is a sequencer. It's called Dr. Chaos. And when you see it here, let's say even if I turn it on, it's not going to do anything. Let's put solo. It's not doing anything because it's a MIDI. It's almost like a MIDI controller. So what I need to do now is I need to pair it up with an instrument or a sample. All right, so let me go back to the instruments here. Let's say, let me just choose any instrument without even listening to it. And I'm gonna drag it over to Dr. Chaos here. So now the name of the actual sound is here, but it has a sequencer. So when I press play, which is the space bar, so now it's playing a kind of, sorry, I need to drag this. It's playing a kind of sequence. So the sequence here is straightforward down to up. I don't like the sound. Sorry, let's me look for something else that's more clear. Okay, so this is the sound. It's going from low to high. But let's say I don't want to be bored by this pattern. I'm going to change the pattern here. Now you're constantly changing the pattern. Okay, and then you can change the rate of change. This is faster, this is slower. You can imagine how you could use this live, like in a session. You just literally leave the laptop there and you press play and you want to change the pattern. Then and there, like slowing down. Slowing down is here as well. Jeremy, this is your tempo. So let me say I slowed it down to 40, 50. And then I speed it up to about 162. Okay, so that might clarify for you when you open up a MIDI track. Dr. Chaos is a MIDI track, and then you would need to pair that up with either an instrument or a sample, and it's going to create a pattern automatically. At first, it looks very, very complicated, but it's actually quite easy when it's demonstrated in a simple way. Okay, so let's just leave that there as one example. Now, there's really just so many possibilities in Ableton. I'm going to show you some of the things that I like to use. What I look for would be algorithmic mathematical stimuli or trigger mechanisms that would diversify connections in the brain. So let me look for examples of those. There's this one called the Markov. Let's say shop around, maybe here. So when I drag it here, initially it also won't do anything. What I need to do is I need to connect it to another device. So here I'm gonna connect it to a beat maker. Actually, let me introduce this one first. Instant House by Alex Kidd creates a constant rhythm that I can control in different ways. So let me activate this one for now so we can listen to it. It's complex because I have a particular plug-in that was going on. So this is like a basic beat. If I wanted to change this beat, I would change the pattern here. I would press pattern, or I don't like that. Let me try another one. And here you have kick, snare, hi-hats, percussion. So let's say you press snare, hi-hats, percussion. Now it's only the kick drum that's happening. Now this sounds a little bit hectic because your BPM is at 162. You want to slow down the heartbeat, so you slow it down. That relaxes people. You could add the snare slowly back, hi-hats, percussion, and you can change even the sound by just pressing note. If you feel like people need variation in the process, keep changing it. Okay, so that's really all in the background. Now, talking about plugins, which you wanted to learn more about, Jeremy. This is one plugin that is particular for anything rhythmic based. So let's go into the plugins. I want to remember who owns this so that you can shop. This one is by Melda Production. Write it down. This is going to be useful later on. Melda Production. I'm going to show it to you what I use within that. So I have this one particular plugin that I bought from them. It's called the Rhythmizer. So it's really important that you have as many possible variabilities that would bring about different brain states. Okay, so let's play this one. It's going on, and then I open. If you want to, okay, let me remove this so that you know how to drag and drop. So plugins are external instruments that you would buy from another company, and once you download that, you can load that up in your computer so that you can access it within Ableton. So here you can see I have quite a lot of plugins. Some of them just came automatically with certain purchases. Some of them are free. Some of them I had to buy. Some cost very little. Some cost not so little. So let's say either I go into Melda Production and then it limits already what's theirs. So let's look for the Rhythmizer and find it. So I'm just going to type it here. RHM. Oh, where did it go? Okay, I don't know what happened. I'm just gonna do undo, hoping that I could just bring it back there. Is that it? No. Wait. Okay, I should find it. Maybe I'm not spelling it right.
I think it starts with an M, so you can try MR.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe I need to make it start with an M.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Nothing like a Singaporean to put order. Okay, so this is the Rhythmizer. And let me stop it first. So now we dragged and dropped it here. This is to turn it on or off. So now you can see it's on, because sometimes you might have multiple plugins or effects all at the same time turned on. And if you wanted to open the pop out, you press on this wrench icon. So now it's there. So what I can do with this is I can configure spontaneous beats or rhythms that will give it like differences. So I'm still able to keep the same tempo, but I can shift through different, possibilities. It's still the same thing as Dr. Chaos. And this has just so many different sequences. Okay, so yeah, I wanted to show that one. So I put up this instant beat just to give you an example of something that you can put in there that's a rhythm that could stay open for the whole time. And you can just slowly change it either by accessing the instant house instrument alone. But if you wanted more dissonance, diversity, you'd put a plug-in like the Rhythmizer to add diversity. If you don't have any questions about this as an example of something percussive, then we can move on to other possibilities. Okay, so I think while we're on the subject of plugins, let's look for something universal. Okay, let's open up firstly possible virtual instruments. So this is the Spitfire Audio website. So initially, you can go to Spitfire Audio. It's a very comprehensive website with free, very generously given plugins that you don't need to pay for. This can work with your edition Jeremy, which is light. This can work to the advanced editions, which are all the way to studio. No, suite. And then when you go into, I think it's Discover. Yeah, just go to the lab section. And in the lab section, this is where you can look for the different possible downloads that are free, and there's just so many. They're quite good with orchestral music, but there's also some weird, interesting stuff that you might want to experiment with. Synthesizer sounds, percussion sounds. So this alone might take you like a year to explore, or shorter, longer, depending on your attention span. So once you download this, it will load up into your, what do you call this? Your AUV folder or VST folder. It usually does that automatically. Otherwise, you can research on how to move some folders around so that it will instantly come out in your workstation, whether it be Live, Bitwig, GarageBand, Logic Pro, and so on and so forth. So having given that example, let's go to the labs then. So labs, as we've demonstrated, was owned by Spitfire. So when you press Spitfire, I own a solar plug-in. That one I had to pay for because it's something used by the soundtrack maker of our time, Hans Zimmer. But that one you have to pay for. Let's look at Labs, because Labs actually has so much to offer already. That's for free. So this is what it would look like once you download Labs, and it becomes a plug-in that you can put into your audio station, which in this case is Ableton. Then it's right there. You can play around with it. So when you open this, it will show you everything you've downloaded so far. So here you have the different sections, and these are the different categories of what type of instrument there is. So when you go back to the website, it initially looks like this. And these are actually collections of sounds, folders of sounds. So when you go back to Live, these folders are there. So let's say I'm interested in maybe a cello. Like, who doesn't like a nice cello? So you can shop around. Normally the sounds, sometimes the sounds will come out a bit. Okay, I'm not getting it, but I'm just gonna load that here. So okay, for Ableton users who don't have a MIDI keyboard, you don't actually need a MIDI keyboard. This is all you have to do. You press this icon over here, and you can use the keyboard on your laptop, starting from A all the way to K or L. They are keyboard representations. I mean, I could very well press this one. Oh, that's why it's not making a sound. I'm sorry. It's because I need to activate this. And I had these solo sections isolating the sound. So let me isolate this and activate it here. So now I can construct using this. Okay, so let me go back there. So now I have it here. As soon as I press one key, there's one voice. I press two keys, two voices. It's a bit too loud. Don't want to destroy your ears. You can change the tuning here. Changing any parameter changes the energy. I press here in the middle, and I can shift from either more reverb, which is a kind of echo, or a room reverberation. Okay, or a delay. So soundtracks are built usually on orchestral. So you want to make movies inside people's hearts and brains. These are super duper useful. Attack would be usually under an ADSR capacity of synthesizer. So when attack is low, as soon as you press the key, you hear it right away. And then when you, it takes a long time for the sound to come in. So there might be instruments that are too harsh in the beginning. So the attack would be how you adjust when does the sound kick in as soon as you press the key. The release would be how long does the sound last. Doesn't last very long. It lasts a lot longer. Yeah? That's too long now. Okay, so that's one plugin example. So starting with that, we have the cello. Let's say now maybe you want to mangle or to create an effect that is much more than what is provided by Spitfire. So I would go back to my plugins, and here are my plugins. Let me give an example of a much used free effect. So go to valhalladsp.com, take some time, write that down. And they have some free downloads that are, in fact, quite useful for so many music producers and musicians out there. So this one's particularly powerful. It's called the Super Massive. They have some other free ones, but just as long as you know this, then you can access choices. Let me look for the other free one. So now we're in Valhalla. Yeah. Supermassive and Space Modulator is free. This might be free, I'm not sure. So once you have it, you might want to use it. So I will drag Supermassive from the browser into the instrument, and it's going to show up down here. Okay, you can either see it or not see it, and then you can control it now. So I will make some sounds, and then I'll make some differentiations on the settings. So you can see what we did. We took a cello and then we made it into a spaceship, alien, futuristic sound, right? It's not shutting down, so I'm just going to turn that off. So there are no limits actually to Ableton. You can add as many effects that are ongoing at the same time. I'm going to put in the space modulator. And then let's see how this sounds on this particular plugin. So the mix would measure the amount that's there. And then you can easily go through the different presets that you're doing space to see what that sounds like. It's the shuzz. Okay, it changes the sound completely. Now, what I want to demonstrate is you can use these effects anywhere you want, as long as it's an existing instrument that you've dragged and dropped here. So let's go back to instant beat or instant house. Let's take Supermassive, put that there. Okay, so let's inspect this now. Let's shut off the rhythmizer so we can hear Valhalla purely out of this one. So we press play. This is the basic rhythm at its purest. And then I'm gonna turn on Valhalla. So you can see, okay, that's interesting, but maybe there's too much of the delay. So I'll reduce the mix, trying to look for what's the perfect. Okay, and then I'm gonna mix that with the rhythmizer. So now I have two plugins happening at the time. Okay, and then let me go to the labs section so that I am playing the cello along with the drums. Okay, just to demonstrate that. Yeah. So I'll stop it again. You can stop a sound usually by not pressing anything, or this is the stop button. You're going to be looking for this later on when you get confused when you have something playing. Let me give an example of when that, is there a question? You can go ahead if there is.
A short question. Did you experiment, I guess, also with these plugins with the voice? Because you said the voice can be like as an instrument, so you can use all this on the spoken voice.
It's amazing, and that it becomes a kind of vocoder where you can sound like a robot. It sounds like you're doing light language, because there's so many different types of effects that usually comes with Ableton. The more advanced Ableton versions would give you something called this one, Max for Live, which are a whole bunch of special devices that are, they're just very advanced constructions. So we can add this to a voice, an instrument, a synthesizer. An instrument meaning an analog instrument could be something that you learn. It could be a harp or a flute, and then using a mic or a pickup, then you would put these effects in. So yes, it's much possible, and anything's possible. So what I'm gonna do here is gonna go demonstrate what is a sample. So I'm happy to just email this to anyone using Ableton, because this would allow you to start out. These are just different strange patterns that I treat as it could be a rhythm, it could be, okay, so let me just shop around with you. There's so much here. Okay, maybe I like that one. So I'll drag that here. So what's going to happen now is I have this beat, and then it's going to synchronize with this beat no matter what the BPM is. So let's turn this on, activate, and then don't forget to press the auto for the monitor so you can hear the sound. So you can't hear anything yet. Oh, sorry. This is, let's take out Valhalla and Rhythmizer. And let's shut this off. So let me turn this on now. So they're playing at the same time. Okay, so this is called a sample. And so you can just layer the different possible rhythms one on top of each other, even as you're starting to add more layers of, let's say, a cello. I wanted a guitar there. I wanted a harp. I wanted the flute, which are instruments. Let's say, okay, I want the flute. Say I wanted a harp. It's like a nice harp. That's just another instrument. So quiet everything down, maybe keep the instant beat happening. So here's a harp. And pressing my keys, I can make harp sounds. But I don't want to get stuck with my keyboard because I need to be holding people's bodies. So let's say ahead of the session, I would like to construct some patterns. So I can double click on this as one option. And I can really just make an arpeggio by randomly creating patterns without even thinking about it. I've not actually done this before. So I'm going to press the play button here now. And I can alter these by making them longer. They sustain longer. Let's say it sounds just way too complex. And I can just drag and drop all these. So let's say I put in all the layers here. Okay, so it's sounding a little bit too mechanical for me. So what I'll do is I'll just add one of the plugin examples that we have demonstrated. Or let me say I wanted to demonstrate another. So this is one of my favorite plugins. It's called Spaced Out. And it's by Baby Audio. You can just Google that. This is what Spaced Out looks like. This is one of my favorite effects plugins. So let's listen to the harp alone, which to me sounds a little bit clumsy because I constructed it rather quickly. This is what it sounded like before the effect. And then I press this on. Let's make it even go backwards. So it sounds a lot more usable. So you can see what I was demonstrating there was I wasn't even thinking about it. I intuitively just messed up a whole bunch of notes. Say you wanted a variation, you have really two options. Either you can press the record button, and as soon as I press this record button while things are playing, I can construct a pattern using my keyboard, meaning I can just play with the ongoing rhythm. And then I press it again. Now it's recorded here. Okay. This is called a loop. So now it's going to keep playing over and over again. And I have now two recordings. I have this version here, and I have this version here. So you can create or construct as many versions as you want. So either you have a hardware that allows you to press buttons, not having to look at the screen, either a Launchpad or a push live like extension of Ableton, which is like a big box that mirrors in hardware what all of these looks like, so that when you want to change any variation, whether it be the volume, which clip is going to play, you don't actually need to be looking at the screen at all, like later on. Okay, so that's one example of how a plug-in could mix up with an existing instrument. So let's see what I'm going to do. I had the harp there. Yeah, I made all these recordings. Right?
May I interrupt?
Yeah.
About this hardware you said with Ableton? So
Yeah.
if you don't look at the screen or doing with the mouse, what is the hardware for that?
Let me get it because it's beside me so you can see it.
Sorry, Jeremy, for interrupting, but
No, those are good questions. I love it. Yeah.
I was trying to do. Okay.
This is called a push. It's an Ableton push. It's a hardware that was constructed by Ableton. This is not the latest. The latest is really expensive. This one probably you could get cheaper. I don't know. Maybe, yeah. I got this for about $800, but it's probably on sale for less. But producers use it to, I can control the master volume, the tempo. Remember the clips on Ableton? These are the clips. And if it doesn't seem like there's enough, then you can press certain buttons so you can just keep scrolling. And there's this amazing screen here that will show you all the parameters that you can see on Ableton. Whether you remember how you can, it looks very elegant. But for people who don't have as much access to funds at the moment, then some of these cost as little as $100 or even less than $100. Their clips are there. You can still scroll. You can control volume, and this is a Launchpad by the company Innovation. There are also smaller. There are many MIDI controllers that control Ableton. Ableton has maybe one of the most partnerships with MIDI controllers for DAW that would have friendly mechanisms. So even if you don't have the clips, you can control volume, you can control, let me demonstrate how that works without having, I am connected to a MIDI controller down here. Wait. So over here, it says MIDI. And as soon as you press that, it changes the color. So let's say you wanted to control a specific parameter. So let's say this is the what do you call this? This is the tempo. Or no, let's look for something a little bit more complex. So let's say this pad here. I want to control the chaos button, or this one, the filter cutoff. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and then I'm going to change my video. So as soon as I press one of these knobs here, it's going to record that instantly in Ableton. So that parameter that I wanted to control, I can control it here. You can see it's not a, it doesn't control the clips, but I can control the parameter if that parameter was important to me. You see what I mean? So there's actually so many amazing correlations between the digital and the hardware. So let me see if it is controlling. Remember, it was this one. Wait. Okay, it's not doing it. Oh, there. So it's changing a little. Maybe that's not such a. Let me try this one. Okay, so those aren't good examples. It's not working, but yeah, that's normally how it works. Well, this one's moving for some reason as I move, but yeah, you can just experiment with it like later on. Just an introduction to hardware. Traditionally the Launchpad is what people have been using, and then Ableton Push came out recently, and it's totally integrated. As soon as you make the connection, it will actually, to deepen your thoughts around this, either in the short or long term. So Ableton is a German company, which tells us a lot about its functionality, which is amazing. There's a new version of Ableton that came out. It's severely expensive. It's called the Ableton 3. What it does is it actually exports Ableton into the instrument. Oh, I don't know what's happening to my video because I'm holding up the yeah. Ableton 3, which is the one that came after this, is expensive, but the reason why is it's because it acts as an instrument itself. So on Ableton, you can load up all the instruments, it will record it so that you don't need your laptop anymore. Okay, you can literally change the parameters there. It becomes a what's called a standalone. So even if you don't have any other synthesizers, all you have is Ableton, which can have a ton of instruments and a ton of effects. There's a really high memory. So this becomes a really powerful overall workstation that's without a laptop. You're literally controlling all the parameters there. That's what makes it interesting. If I was to tell you how much it costs, it's about $2,000 US. I think that would just be justifiable if you would not invest in almost anything else other than the more advanced Ableton that could take some people months or years to study if that's what they want. It's a commitment. That kind of price tag is a commitment, and it's what music producers use. I don't think anyone should buy anything they haven't researched. So open up videos, look things up. I don't want people to spend on anything they're not sure about, because I really treasure my own synthesizers because I don't necessarily use them for information. Wait, Andre might be okay. I use it because I'm interested in learning music and it develops my brain. So I take it slow with investing because anyway.
Yeah,
Any questions about Push or?
I tried with Ableton just as a try version, and somehow I liked it very much, but I really had to admit I got kind of lost because I had no clue what was impact on what, and I had no overall structure in my mind on how to use it. Probably I didn't invest enough time to really go step by step into. So I was trying it. It was surprisingly a lot of things, but I had the feeling having no control at all on how it is.
But I hope this is helpful, even just going into things one at a time.
Yes, totally.
Let's see if other people have any questions that have come up so far.
Yeah, Pai, so I have a question. So I kind of get how you're layering things and how you're creating a loop, and then once the base is established, you can add on with like the harp and flute, etc. Curious to know, how do you then transit into another song or another rhythm or another space, or do you just allow that space to last for that 1 hour, one whole session, with the just interchanging the the sounds that comes in? I think you're on mute. Sorry.
With what I demonstrated, when you change an instrument, you change the rhythm, you change the vibration, right? So you don't have all the instruments on all at the same time.
Okay.
And then if you're doing this from a music production capacity, let's say it can take a week, it can take a month. So let's say you do a first 3 minutes or 5 minutes, and then you just let it be that, and then you just wait. And then, okay, I think I found the next sound. Then you can add another layer. You can record that, and then you can change it any which way you like. You see what I mean? If you're still learning and you're at the starting point, you can literally just drop a song, and then just put layers on top of the song as a starting point.
So that's actually what I've been doing. So I just have a song, a track, then I include like clips of like children, lullabies and things like that. Yeah, so that's how I've been doing it. But I kind of want to explore like the live element. So yeah, I think I probably need to get my hands a bit dirty. Yeah, just to.
So then what you would do is work with a template. It could be called a template or a file. You put that on, you can have different versions. It could be this one for depression, this one for corporate people, this one for geriatric, super old people, nursing home. And then you would have the set template that you don't have to touch. You can change that bit by bit, but you then would add the layers of instruments so that the adaptation that you put in, anytime you feel that there's something missing, in the beginning you would prep that before, right? You would line them up, put in the ones that have the variations, but later on you could even do that intuitively, so that you just have your template, and then you can put in the sound that you would need if you start to familiarize with how that could be. It's just dragging and dropping, actually. And some people can do that very, very fast because there are shortcuts where you don't even need to use the mouse. You can put Command A, Command this and that, C, Z, you know.
So if I understand you correctly, you would do then like with this preset, like as a standard, like you in a session, but then in the you can intuitively adjust, put something on top or add something while you are performing.
You see what I've been doing with the S button. It's either you can use that to isolate what you would like turned on. Wait, how come it's okay? So I'm pressing just the key, and then now it's activating all of those. This isn't playing automatically because I haven't pressed space bar. So if I do, so let's say I don't like that anymore. I've reduced this now to just 2 instruments playing at a time. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this on. This is an instrument beside me called the Lyra 8. It's a hardware instrument. Wait. So that's an accident. So it's a matter of just creating a whole collection that you can shop from, getting to know them all very well, the way a lot of you know your songs that you use in your sessions. And there you go. You could even put on with your audio interface, you can plug in your iPad or your phone so that rather than let's say the synthesizer plugged in, this could very well be, let's say, your noise app. And if your noise app is generated through that, then you can easily drag and drop a plug-in or let's say an effect. Okay, like a looper or a roar. Roar for me is one of the most powerful effects that people are talking about. It just came out of the new version. So yeah, you could drag and drop that to the noise app so that if you're using actual songs or whatnot, you're able to defamiliarize the sound to make it a little bit more interesting. That you're yeah.
How exactly do you connect? Like, is it a hardware connection, or if you like you have a mobile phone or some other instrument to say, okay, I connect with Ableton, or you have to import the file?
Okay, so Jeremy actually bought this in City Music in Singapore. I love this. So this is called an audio interface. And here's this one gives me 2 inputs. There are interfaces that can have as many as 4 or 8 inputs. So if I have many instruments, I need more inputs. So here I have 1 synthesizer plugged in 1, and 1 synthesizer plugged in 2. And then if I was to share what that looks like here, this is channel 1. I can choose. And then this is channel 2. So let's say channel 2 was the noise app. Then I would put channel 2, and then let's say I was plugged into here. Let's say my noise app, which is actually my iPad. And then either the iPad needs, let's say an iPad normally is a USB-C connection. So I would need a USB-C adapter going into a small cable that would go here. But because this is big, I would need another adapter that would be like from small to big. And so what this does is it will convert the electrical signal into a signal that Ableton can recognize, right? So then you can record anything into Ableton, and let me I need to go back to my normal screen. Wait. So you can see that you don't have to give up your iPad if you're used to it. It just becomes one of the other layers. I think what's good about Ableton is you can create something totally original, so that if you wanted to use that within like a public space, or you knew you might have a problem with copyright, and say you publish that in Spotify or Apple Music, you can't really just take something from an existing owned sound and then publish that, because you'll have problems. Ableton, anything that you construct in Ableton will be totally allowed. So let's say you take in a noise that came with another program, you mangle that almost completely, then you make it yours. Yeah, I think. I mean, we need to read the ethics on that, but I think, but we would respect the ones that do own. But I'm just giving like instances where a song legally, when it gets mixed into a recording, there's a certain percentage that actually becomes allowable legally, that it becomes your music already.
Yeah.
Like sampled music.
Hi, so I have a question. So the other time when you came to Singapore, when you facilitated the sessions and playlists for us, what was the setup like? Were you having a original pre-recorded track and then you just layered on with live sounds? Was that what you're doing? I think you're mute again. Sorry.
I think I brought like 3 synthesizers, and then that was also with the noise app, and that was with Ableton sometimes.
Okay.
So I can't even describe to you, but I usually come with a variety. Yeah, but if I wanted to simplify, because it takes some time to set up, like a lot of the apps are already in my iPad. So I was using DJ Pro. But ideally, like in Maya, we really bring in these instruments and people can tell the difference.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to share the screen and go into something nonlinear. Having demonstrated live, this is having some. Okay, having demonstrated live, I want to show Logic Pro as an option for Mac users, because I don't want to give up on Logic Pro. They're actually the same mechanism. So here's one view, and when I press this starts to look like Ableton. That's like kind of live. These are clips, the same as you notice in live. Here are the clips, and then when I press tab, it becomes like this, which is the arrangement view. So back to Logic Pro, this is the arrangement view, and this is the clips view. So they actually do the same thing. So because I demonstrated how instruments are used, here are merely audio clips. But if I wanted to demonstrate to you how you can do the same thing, let's say I double click and I go into new software instrument track. All right, so before people purchase or commit to Ableton, I want to tell you that you can do exactly the same thing here. Let's say I press Alchemy especially, and here's how many instruments I have access to on my MacBook Pro. It's tremendous as well. And you can see the user interface is a lot easier to walk around in. So let's say I want a bass, or say let's shop around for pads. Above the clouds, for example, and I double click, it's already here. Oops, what did I press? I opened the loops. I don't need that. Go away. So I press the MIDI keyboard beside me, and I'm pressing clouds, and I can open. Let me open Alchemy again, and here are the different settings for clouds. So there's still quite a lot of options. Okay, pros and cons for Mac users. Logic Pro is a lot more affordable. It's a standard $200 and you don't need to pay anything else. The only thing is you would need maybe a minimum capacity for your computer, and to have access to all these loops and instruments, I actually needed 80 gigabytes free. I had to free up 80 gigabytes. I don't think you need the loops per se, but it does pay to have access to them, and you're paying for it. It instantaneously comes. So I guess maybe with 20 gigabytes, you can already access Logic Pro, but you just can't download like all of these. But having access already to the instruments, it's already quite a big deal. So you remember what we did with the plugins. The plugins are also here. The same plugins that I demonstrated. It could be like labs. It could be, where are the other ones? I'm trying to look for, well, this is Rhythmizer, but I'm trying to look for Valhalla for one reason or another. It's not coming out. Here's a really weird plugin, just to show you how interesting and weird plugins can be. This is the one I'm kind of experimenting with at the moment. It's called Synplant. Wait. I can also just access it here. Let me suggest some plugins for you, Jeremy, while we're here. Now that I've demonstrated that you can access many of these on both platforms. So DJ is one of my folders, and Digital Audio Workstations would be the platform. So we looked at Logic Pro and Ableton Live. So I have a collection of these things that I use. Another free plugin that I would love for people to experiment with is Vital. Vital is called the Virtual Synth Technology. It's a VST. It's basically a synthesizer that you can use to shape waveforms. So I can easily just take that here as well. What is that? Vital. It's a plugin. So it's it's here somewhere. There, Vital. So I drag and drop it. It's the same thing here. So let me just close Vital as I opened it as on its own. So this is a good learning tool. Whether you use it or not, I think it would allow you to understand how synthesizers work, which directly affect brain states. I can just take any sound. This is a preset. I close it, and now it becomes a combination of 3 different oscillators. Let me look for something a little bit more complex where the oscillations are. I'd like differences in the way the waveforms look. Okay, let me see if this is activated. It's not. So this is Vital. I turn it on. I press solo. Logic Pro is in the way. I'm just gonna quit and close that. Here's where you see if you have multiple programs on, you're activating them at the same time. Okay, so this is Vital. So I have 3 oscillators turned on. No, wait, there's something still on. Yeah, sorry, there you go. That's why it's noisy. Okay, now it's just Vital. Okay, so just this one. Okay, so this is what I started with, actually. This is my first plugin. You don't need to pay for it. It is over here. Oh, no, here, vital.audio. This is one of the best VSTs out there, and they're giving it away. You don't need to pay for it. You can buy new presets if you get bored with what comes with it, but there's already so much that goes with it. I think this is a good way for you to train your brain to construct sound from scratch, and it's a teaching tool. It's a way to understand how waveforms work. Let's say this might be more simple. Okay. So remember, attack as a simple parameter. Like if it's delayed, then you press the button, it takes a long time. And you can literally see that from a visual perspective. So let's say you change the attack to come early as soon as you press the buttons. And then this lets it, yeah, like this is ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, release. So it's changing the shape of the sound. And all of these make a difference. So that's one oscillator. This is like 2. And you can change the shape of this as well. You could really just take your time and learn. Crappy toilet. Okay. So that's like a whole world inside Ableton. That's a whole universe. Okay, you can just think of these as, this is a world. We've opened that up just now. This is a world. You know, all these different parameters. You don't need to touch any of them. You could just put in that plugin that makes things so simple. That's a world. This is a world. You know, you constructed you dragged and dropped these patterns, which you can also just change. This is, once again, a world. You need to double click just so that world opens up. Like this is that world that we demonstrated already. You know, so for me, I have been collecting these over maybe 2 years, and I've just shared with you the ones that are the most useful. Like Animoog is another free synth. A lot of facilitators have this on their laptops. This is what it looks like. It's made by probably the most famous synth company, Moog, most famous company in the world. So I'll turn it on. It should be working. And then once again, you can shop around for different presets that come with the app. So let's say you don't want to get stuck with your laptop. You press hold. Say, I really just want a certain delta state to last for however long I would like. So you press it there. No, press hold and then press it there. You say, oh, that's way too high for my taste. You press this one. So throughout the whole journey, whatever you're doing, you could be walking around, you could be touching bodies. You don't have to touch it again. Another complex thing you can do here is the arpeggio, or ARP for short. You press it and then it will construct a pattern based on what is turned on. So now it's playing that in a sequence. This one's not so obvious. Let's like here, this is an arpeggio. Hold. So if you play that along with everything else that you've constructed so far, Okay, so that's it. That's basically it. Any questions so far? Until maybe we can see what else is here.
I just, I'm very sorry. I need to step out because I go to see my mom, so I need to leave. But
yeah,
I would have many questions, but I have the feeling I have still so much to learn, take in, to try out, to take the time to really.
Okay. So what would clarify is we're gonna have these conversations for the rest of the year up until November. So we actually started advanced because that's where Jeremy is at, and we want to support him. Next week we can conduct a Zoom call that starts out from a much simpler place, where we can go into song selection based on some of the theories, and then we could go into how to construct a library from scratch that would be possible for multiple platforms. So thank you for the advanced questions at this stage. It's a good running start, but we have so much time to go over this, even beyond the intensive timeline.
I also had a question linked with that regarding, because we announced in our community that we would have a session with you or two in Zoom regarding production, the music. So said they were interested. At the same time, what my feeling is that for many of them, as facilitators, they are just users rather than producers.
Yeah, so we wouldn't bring up Ableton for sure. It's not advisable for people who are still quite busy in the energetic realms. We'll give them the simple apps for now.
Yeah, just as a first entry point to see what is feasible for them, right? Relatively intuitively. Like, even I would say myself, I am exactly at that stage, but to make it approachable so that they can open up to it. At least a few of them might feel the impulse to say, "Wow, that's so interesting." Let's invest some time to go.
Well, for communities like yours, the platforms and the instruments need to go hand in hand with some of the theories that we still need to inject. And so when we start talking about balance, homeostasis, then they start to come together, which is already embedded in innerintensive. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
So we, as you remember, we spoke about having the session, or whether Saturdays or Sundays.
Let's talk about that separately, because then, like this week, we're just finishing this last training, and then we'll make space for that.
Perfect.
We can do that soon.
Yeah. So I will do possible options.
Yeah. Amazing.
Okay. So thank you so much. Is this recording available?
Yes, we'll post it. It's for everyone, always. Okay. Thank you, Sigfrid. See you again.
Bye. Thank you. Bye, Jeremy.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Okay, let's see what some of the people who are here, in case like a question had come up, if you were in a position to actually speak, if you're not in work. And I think Sophie's with her kids. But Jeremy as well, you're the one who's so do you feel more confident here?
Yeah, I think watching you how you do it, it gives me like, oh, I'm so excited to try, even though I'm scared for some reason. But I think I just need to get my hands a little bit more dirty and just explore, and then more questions will come up as well, for sure. So I have another question, it's a separate note. So I'm actually, so after the last time I ran a session for my community, like one of them asked them, oh, would you want to try experimenting creating a playlist based on bliss? And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And then her rationale came from, like a lot of us come from, understanding pain, trauma, etc. Like what would be on the other end of that? And that got me curious. So I kind of want to know, like, what would be your thought process if you'd be creating like a playlist about bliss?
For me, there has to still be a journey towards bliss, and people need to confront certain things on the way there, because it's like a hero's journey. So sometimes bliss comes out naturally out of the ability to also dive deep into the darkness. I think bliss is already quite accessible for new age communities that would like to stick with the positive, but the inner dance does look at the non-dual state from the point of view where we're not avoiding anything, and the trigger mechanism stop bothering us. So if we were to stick to only bliss, I think we would create a reliance or a dependency in the workshop that this is blissful, but when they step out, it almost becomes monastic in that way, where I go momentarily into paradise, but when I go back into the subway, or then that's called not bliss. I think inner dance is interested in everything is actually bliss depending on your perspective. But given that, I would still then shop around for instruments that bring about deep delta restive states. But it would be creative for you to experiment. Also, the problem with this is bliss is relative. What is bliss for one person is not going to be. So were you to get pulled into that person's bliss, you might limit collective bliss state that would be different in India and Singapore is a very, very multicultural space. So what would be the exact rhythm, tonality of bliss? I don't think there's a real answer to that. Out of subjective space, it's all relative.
Yeah, so I think that also poses a question, right? Like even as a producer and you're creating that space, a lot of it still stems from our own subjective lens on what is bliss, how much dark or shadows are we getting them to confront, how much is too much, because it's still relative to our lens as well. So I'm curious to know, how do you balance that, your own subjectivity versus holding that objective space for people? Even
relativity belongs to the moment where bliss would show up spontaneously because of what happened before that. So how could you pre-program bliss even? I think the best answer to that is the facilitator needs to find his or her own bliss for them to express that through the sound or the energy. What I like about these platforms is when you do, I mean, I've seen your body, Jeremy, you know how to access this energy. And what we're then giving the energy through you are the tools. So when you have the expression for the energy, it's like you're training the energy. Well, that doesn't make sense. You're just enabling the energy to express with a wider scale, spectrum, or vocabulary. Yeah, so
I think that's a very, very interesting note, because I realized that after I had that expression in the demo with you, it felt so natural and easy for bodies that I was working with to express energy in the same way as well. So it came to a point of time where I realized, am I getting them to express it in my way of expression, or somehow they are attuning to me because I'm working with them and they find that safety to express it in the way that I found it within myself as well. So I'm curious to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think we're what we're trying to do as producers is to lessen the gap between the producer and the receiver. So those who have experienced the energy, they would come close to understanding what would happen when people receive this. Because one example is when you're actually sitting up, your eyes are open and you're watching a demo, the experience is totally different when you're in there. So I've done demos where the people are horrified that the sound's being created, but when you listen to the person laying down, they say, I just went to the universe. This has never happened to me. I went cosmic. I went into the black hole in a span of like 10 minutes or 5 minutes. So it takes like a lot of empathy. So that the producer needs to be the receiver. We can't really just produce. We have to empathize with what would this feel like while people are laying down. And that can be quite nonlinear. You need quite some experiences in order to construct something that's being created by that experience itself. And you see what I mean about lessening the gap between producer and receiver.
Yeah. And on a separate topic as well, even though as producers we are using music and frequencies to create a space, but I remember you talked about the use of silence, or at least the first demo you did in Singapore. It was a lesson on silence and how people could still find themselves in space even without music as well. So that gets me questioning, like, how exactly important is the role of music in helping them to find that space if the absence of music facilitates that same response as well?
Okay, well, from the modern body receiving music or silence, music in our experiences have given us the possibility to scale to large numbers of people the experience, as well as the duration of time, so that we can give them aspects and parts of a journey that's not just the whole, but the many different parts, dimensions, layers, parts. Music can do that because of music's ability to mirror how a nervous system is constructed. So we almost need to stop using the word music at one point and really just see them as a mirror for how the brain is always constructing itself, which is made up of frequencies, amplitudes, vibrations. So we really just chose an effective art form and a sensory modality. We can always demonstrate like an awakening process is silent, but that would last 10 minutes is already quite a long time. And you know, sometimes when you're in silence, you might experience feeling, but conversation has a spiritual element as well. So that when you're talking to people, you somehow can feel the network of information that has historical and geographical meanings that's important when we're here on Earth. It's developmental in that way. We're not just emptying, which silence can do, but we're allowing people to grow up and mature, to have the whole being able to have an awareness of how the parts are constructed beyond the current structure. We're learning the role nonverbal, nonlinear structure looks like from other dimensions. You know, because people are partially tired because they live in a verbal reality that's quite linear. Music being a nonlinear device, once people either sensitize or desensitize to the trigger mechanisms, it pushes into brain states that most people are only accessing through psychedelics often, or other more coercive means that's not as invasive. Because music as a medicine isn't chemical, you know, it's free. It's liberated, and it's always been there in spirituality, in ritual, in religion. Why not that this comes to us as a beautiful gift that actually had always been there? It's just that maybe because now we're studying music production, but the opening inner dance gives is, have we ever really listened to the message of the cosmos? Now we're truly listening, and music isn't just entertainment, it's entrainment.
Okay. Yeah, so I have another question. So I remember in one of my sessions as well, there was a lady who had a really intense experience. She was like shouting and crying and rolling about, pulling at her hair. And then 5 minutes later, another lady next to her just sat up. So I went over to her and asked, like, you know, is everything okay? And she said, so this was about 15 minutes into the track or 20 minutes in the track already. So she shared about how she was very triggered by the lady next to her, and she just needed space on her own. So my question then is, you know, when I observe a body like that, and then there are 7 other people who are okay in their own experiences as well, does that mean that for her, like maybe that level of safety or that level of trust or that level of surrender in the early stages of Delta has not yet been reached, versus the other people who, you know, are there and they're receiving the activation from that lady, but they are not as affected, they are not as afraid, like you said, feeling the fear without being afraid as well. So is it a matter of that body itself has not yet reached that Delta level? Or I don't know.
Especially, let's say we were to look at it from a Singapore context. culturally, it's quite conservative from either the Singaporean, the Chinese, and the political perspective. People are really bound up. So a lot of people would be overstimulated by catharsis happening near them because maybe childhood experience was that they were sheltered, they were not allowed to express themselves. So when they see someone letting go of control or surrendering that way, they would actually get triggered. So we have to be wary of this in certain countries, cultures, and situations where when Singaporeans do open up, they really open up. And so I have so many memories of getting worried about the police coming or the neighbors complaining because people really scream there. So we need to adjust basically the trigger elements because it's such a, your country, it's so tightly packed, it's so dense that I think there's some value to allowing people to become the collective consciousness where there's a yearning, but there's also a lack of personal space. And music is space. So when you do see, say, delta or parasympathetic, some people are maybe coming to sessions because they need that space. The other ones are needing to be heard because they've been bottled up and couldn't express the truth.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm sitting with the dilemma, because I get it in terms of, we all bottle up, we repress things, and we are literally looking for spaces to release it. But at the same time, there's also a fear of, as a producer or as a space holder, about how much trigger mechanisms is too much. Right? Because the only way for them to express it is they face and confront their triggers, but how much of it is too much? And another question that is sitting in my head as well is, am I intentionally trying to trigger them?
Yeah.
And where's the ethical
yeah.
You get it. So yeah, a boundary with that. Yeah.
When it's too late, let's say someone got triggered, you can't actually do anything about it. And so you do need to trust that that's something someone needed to, everything is allowed. One of the things that we need to require those who are coming in is you need to own up to whatever comes up, because that's the nature of this work. Take responsibility. It's not the nature spirits. It's not the aliens. It's not the ghosts. And in many Chinese cultures, there does tend to be this imbalance between receiving and giving. That's what happens in shame cultures. There's not that much ability to create safe containers for oneself, culturally and historically. So when people do have that oversensitivity, when they do get triggered, they should learn from that too. So what you do have control, if it's already happened and you couldn't control the past, you could speak to that later on, that maybe this is needing to be looked at, because it is part of this journey for sure. And we cannot assure you that this is not going to happen, because I've come up with very, very minimal trigger mechanisms, and then people have gone into the wildest thing ever. And I couldn't do anything about that. That was just really waiting for someone. They were using the session itself to do that. So it becomes like an art form. It becomes like a science. I think this is why you are interested in the production part, because you don't want to just rely on other people's music, that when you press play, you know that the trigger mechanisms obviously are important. They need that to confront and to feel more. But learning to balance that can be helped by the platforms.
Can I ask a question that's not related to music? I'm curious to know a little bit more about touch. So I know now that I have started to create, like, a little bit of my own music, I realize that I don't like people's bodies will move and I don't actually need to touch them. So I kind of understand that from the space right now. So my question is, when is touch necessary, or from your perspective?
The more I understood music, the less I touched people.
Yeah.
And what's crazy now, Jeremy, it's so interesting. I don't even look at the room anymore. When I'm channeling through the music, I can feel people even more. That when I ended up looking at bodies, I actually lose the connection. So it takes a tremendous amount of trust to just create the conditions where healing will happen on its own without believing that I'm the powerful healer who's going to save people's problems. Based on my understandings of how the nervous system works and the energetic flow works, I don't touch people. In demos, I do, because it needs to be demonstrated what is safe, what is powerful, profound, what is also intimate, what is non-invasive. I started out with touch. I didn't start out with music. Music appeared maybe 10% of the way, but the first 10% of the history, my history, I was just touching people, and I was deeply in touch. But right now, for me, on an evolutionary basis, touch becomes less and less. The more important tool that I had been working with the last years has been verbal cues. Okay, let me touch upon that. So let's say you trigger something. It could be in the sleep playlist, people get triggered. Or so when you trigger something, it's either you're triggering the stimulatory pathway or the inhibitory pathway. So either people relax more or people get excited and stimulated. So you can still dichotomize stimulation as being a positive trigger or an irritation. So let's say you have that layer of parasympathetic underneath that irritation. You still give people the chance to look at the thing that they're not looking at, whether that happens while people are sleeping or awake. And for me, okay, you start out with a biological trigger. So let's say you stimulate, you have these excitatory pathways activating, whether it be adrenaline, cortisol, dopamine, and then the downers, the depressants would be acetylcholine, it would be serotonin, it would be GABA. That's a biological mechanism, yes? Endocrine or nervous system wise. The psychological would be the verbal cues. So say a negative or dense psychological blockage might be I'm poor, I'm small, I'm not good enough, I did the wrong thing, I don't like that person is bad. You can start to include either inside the recording that you produced or live, you speak it. After they got triggered, there is now an opportunity, whether it be that woman who got annoyed. So let's say, okay, what are my tools now? She's irritated. Then we read that from a color-based perspective. Are they dealing with scarcity, insecurity? The trigger was necessary for them to feel that, whether it be anger, despair, insecurity, and then the more holistic statement, the visionary statement could come in. Everything's happening for a reason. This is giving me a message. I have the power to construct my reality. So you know that you can speak that, and that's not biological. That is psychological. That would meet the belief structure that's shifting from lack or scarcity into fullness.
So the way that you phrase the verbal cues, like do you use it a word or do you use I am poor and allow that to just receive for them to receive? Like how do you initiate the verbal cue?
Usually the okay, so here you have the multiple tools. Let's say what you're looking for would be how the vibration could meet the words. And you want to match that psychological and biological met between which is music, which is the middle space. Normally I would say the vibrations is enough to bring about the fear.
Right.
That can make that rise, and the verbal cues might come in later when the positivity belief structure could come in, where okay, you're good enough, or you're amazing, or let's say you want it to be creative. Go to YouTube, look for part of a movie. It could be The Matrix, it could be something a lot more emotional, take that, you use a program that just takes the words. It can be familiar to people from Lucy, Interstellar, Matrix, The Lord of the Rings. And let's say they're at the bottom or the Dark Knight, and then they're about to dig their way out of the hole, then bring out the hero moment. But that would go with something heroic or majestic or something that would energize, so that you know that you dared to bring them into fear. But then when you bring them to the fear, the opportunity would be afterwards would be courage. So you would have a vibration that's courageous, but you would also bring in the words. They don't have to be your own. It could have been spoken by Nicole Kidman or Keanu Reeves or some Japanese something or Chinese, or it could be your voice. If you're doing it live, it could be as simple as saying good. Okay, that's already something their inner child might have needed to hear when they were all alone, when they were depressed, when they didn't have the source of energy nearby.
Right.
And then not too much. Then you take it away. You give them the chance to enact on that, so that you're not creating this dependency.
Right.
Mm.
And so another question. So I've been reading a bit more about how the breath and how it correlates to the different brainwave states. So for example, like people who are very high in beta in the fight, stuck in the sympathetic state, they have shallower breaths as well. And I noticed how this is mirrored even in the bodies, and I'm watching them. The breathing might be shallow and fast, versus if they're a lot more relaxed, they can like take deeper breaths, longer exhalations, etc. So I'm wondering whether have you experimented with maybe initiating or getting them to mirror a breath state to go even deeper, or to enhance, activation even more? Like, has that been experimented with?
Okay, when people are in the trance, as soon as you even mention the word breath, it would trigger it. So you don't give them, I don't like giving commands.
Okay.
As soon as you say, go back to your breath, or, but I don't actually use that term. What I like to do from the whole train of causation is to work on the heart. If you trigger the heart, because the circulatory system is partially intertwined with the respiratory, if you let's say accelerate the BPM in music, then heart rate would go up. Then stroke volume would increase, which is not just the speed of the heart rate, but what's the amount of blood that will flow through. Put both of those together, what you have is cardiac output. If you increase cardiac output, there would be this need for more air to pass through. So you see what I mean? In the beginning, let's say, okay, they're anxious, but they're not breathing right. So what you would experience is a buildup. So there would be this pressure to build cardiac output. And when there's not enough blood passing through, but their heart is palpitating, but they're not breathing deep, what happens is that actually starts to trigger the renal and the adrenal, the kidneys and the adrenal system. So sometimes the catharsis or the emotion comes from that buildup of there's a lack of nutrients, blood, and oxygen, that when you then build that up enough, that's when an emotion could actually show up. And then when you build that up to the stages later on, when they're starting to breathe deeper, and that could be through actually that's when touch could be important. And if you're feeling limited because you're the only one in the room, merely changing the position of their body can influence that as well. So let's say from the point of view of proprioception, when people are afraid, you can notice that their body's locked up. So their arms might be crossed. You know what would happen? Let's say you extended their arm, let's say farther away from their body, that would open up the rib cage, the diaphragm, and that would actually elevate the respiratory. It's called rate and depth. The speed of breathing is breath rate, and the deepness of breathing is called breath depth. So if you correspond that with a certain word system, like verbal cues, vibration, body position, touch, you can see that it's not actually one thing. It's all a concert that deeply affects the organs. And it's not really just the organs, it's electricity flow and the endocrine system that's also coordinated
So
there.
the point you said about like participants, they cross their arms, they roll on their side, etc. So in this instance, as I'm watching their bodies, I'm taking it as a sign as I don't want to be touched. But you said it could be a opportunity to open it up further. So how do I tell?
Okay. When they curl up into a fetal position,
Fetus, yep.
yeah, it usually means don't touch them, but it doesn't mean comfort, care, and contact is not necessary. That's when you look for something soft in the room. It could be a pillow or a blanket. Put it over them, and then they're encased. But usually, the authentic homeostatic processing state happens after a stimulation has occurred, an excitation or catharsis has occurred. It's really then still observing in the room, what have people gone through and where are they now? Because definitely if you do too much, you will disturb them. I want to go back to the breath though. We can't get stuck with the notion that people need to be breathing deep in order to be in a heightened state, because some of the deepest heightened states, in fact, happen when people are going into the shallowest breath. I'm sure you've experienced this.
Yeah,
The
like
body
in
isn't moving
gamma.
anymore.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's gamma all the way to high oscillating frequencies already. Gamma can go up as high as 100 hertz. It's such a big range from 30 to 100. So let's just call it high gamma. High gamma is usually flowing through the brain body system when the shallowest breath is happening. So we can't just say shallow breath is to do with anxiety and the sympathetic nervous system. It's a high gamma, possibly.
Okay. Yeah, I think I got my questions answered. Yeah, it helps me to clarify so many. Yeah, so much.
It's actually quite a lot already. Bolius, do you have you want to ask questions in case you have any? It's up to you.
Yeah, I'm just hello, hi. I'm just enjoying this evening with you, and that's it. Looking what is able to do with Ableton, but I prefer Logic Pro probably. And I'm gonna work with it more, and we'll see. Maybe it's gonna be a little bit easier for me.
Let's
Ableton is
we'll
a
do
bit
another
messy at the moment.
Yeah. It's pretty. We'll do another call on purely Ableton. I mean, on Logic Pro if you're interested. If you don't have that yet, like people have GarageBand, so you can start practicing.
Yeah, I have as well GarageBand. I downloaded Logic Pro, but didn't buy the license yet. So I'm gonna try the GarageBand.
Oh yeah, because Logic Pro
play a
is
little bit
like
around and
yeah, you get it free for 3 months, right?
yeah, I think so.
Okay, so maybe in a couple of
free.
weeks. Yeah, it's for free if you're on MacBook. Maybe in a couple of weeks we could go into Logic Pro because it's hugely interesting as well.
That would be great.
Okay, so I think we can.
I have a question. Sorry, out of curiosity, like what's one thing about innerdance, or like what are you currently experimenting with innerdance at this point? Is there anything?
Say that in a different way, just so we could layer
like,
that.
Is there anything that you are like right now? Are you trying to experiment? Actually, it's the same question. Yeah, I mean, okay. So my guess is you're probably trying to look at what innerdance can, what health conditions, sicknesses, and illnesses can innerdance do to heal. Is that what I'm seeing? Like, where are you at with innerdance right now? Yeah,
okay,
that's what my question is.
All right. Because we've already demonstrated innerdance as it's well known in the world. The cathartic, historically, because innerdance has been there 16, 17 years. I'm interested in the meta system within innerdance, where the application could work within institutional and grounded spaces where we could scale this. So I'm interested in translation, especially now that we're armed with a lot more understanding of what's happening internally, like the invisible parts. So that's why the sleep playlist for me is a powerful opportunity, because I really like the feedbacks, and I really like the fact that you can systematize research, isolate certain parts in the music or amplitude, vibration, frequency, rhythm, so we could find possible correspondences, whether it be like biological markers like stress markers, or melatonin as a marker, where we could experiment with dream states. So I think there's so much of the qualitative. It would be interesting to allow the qualitative to match with the quantitative. So special projects right now emerging, like in South America, related to addiction centers. There's now programs where therapists from all around certain countries like Colombia would now be trained in inner dance without having to call it that even, with a lot more context, but also opening up the vulnerability where, okay, here's what we know based on the time that we have been constructing this historically, and this is what we don't know. So we can meet face to face, eye to eye, with doctors who do want to work with healers and facilitators because of the limitations that are statistically there, that pharmaceutical and invasive medicine has not been able to met to. So I think we're on the forefront of clarifying the role of music as a non-invasive tool in the schooling system and in the education system. There's almost like a set of frameworks that need to topple or collapse into each other, painting a much larger picture as to like a more integrative brain. And I do feel that the auditory cortex needs transformation because of the overstimulation of the visual part of the brain that interprets things into judgment, into contracted states. If we really simply put that forward, that this is the work that we do, these are the formulations related to the autonomic nervous system, circadian rhythm, endocrine system. This is our theory on dream, wake REM states, and so on and so forth. I found that even the most advanced practitioners find it intuitively quite easy to study this. So yesterday I had a call with a lady in the UK who wanted to create a bridge with certain universities, and what they're studying right now are mysticism, psychedelics, but they're now proposing within the UK that, let's study this because it's demystifying, which actually makes it more mystical in some ways. It's also it's not chemical. It's internal. It's internally chemical, but it's not poisonous to the body. It's also not something that creates reliances. So it's like all these dots just coming together. So I don't know if you know it, but Sukin, I met with someone representing the National Health Institute of Singapore, and that's incredible. He's saying that it actually could be possible enough to come up with a serious research, if even the government could put the funds for that. He's admitted that to provide research case studies in inner dance, it's not going to be cheap, because the markers that we would be looking at, they require certain like instrumentations from fMRIs, not these simple EEGs that we're using. But he said that if it passes through something like the ethics committee, which even just to get that approval, it takes 6 months, and then we go into the actual research. If that passes through all those gating mechanisms, this would be allowed in one of the strictest health systems in the world. Can you imagine the possibility in Singapore, where we know people with sleep problems, emotional problems, all kinds of mental, and like companies don't like employees to be not optimal.
Yeah.
So if this is allowable, then imagine the implications. Even if it takes us 10 years or 2 years, it's kind of worth it.
Sorry, I had another like curious question I wanted to ask. So, the first time that you experienced innerdance, was there music?
No, it was what is in the music, which is the high and the low. When I first really experienced innerdance, the sound came out of my body like I was the playlist, and it was the highest and the lowest. And that's when I heard the words, "It began in Africa." It's not like light language. It felt like the high and the low burst out of my body in this music that was tribal and alien at the same time. So I was a speaker. I was the iPad. I was the song.
So you're making like sounds were just coming through you?
It came from my body. It's hard to even remember. I remembered my body like splattering into so much rhythms, but I remember that I was expressing the sound. I sometimes can make that sound. It just comes out. It's like this weird animalistic vibration that has high and low. But back then it was so massive. So I would say, yeah, in a way it began with music. It's just not music from
external.
We're replicating it because everything is spirit anyway. And the internet is still made of spirit and food and air, and everything is nature if you think about it.
Yeah, I was just curious. Thanks for sharing.
Maybe it was a year and a half after I first experienced that I started to use music. And when I did, the real reason why I used music was I knew I could touch people and activate the bodies. They would go into trance states, past lives, bodies would move. But
was it
people
a
would
frequency thing when you did that? Like when you touch?
It's a co-activation. I can bring the brain states and energetic states both because I was there. So I'm not passing anything on. I don't believe in this word transmission. I believe in resonance, so that if I remembered it inside me, people through the energy conversation were also remembering it. So there's no hierarchy. I never healed anyone. I healed myself. I remembered. Like I like the word remembering because we're activating the REM state. So we're remembering. I entered the dream and then everyone remembered, So music became like a metaphor, an analog, or a manifestation that was already happening inside me that was systematizing. So here was the situation when I had that inside me, my body would move or not. I had that. I was passing it on to people one at a time. And I saw that didn't free me up because it created this dependency where, oh, there's the healer, I would go to him. So when I used music, it broke the dependency. Number two, people were lining up and then they all wanted to experience it. I could do it to 10 to 20 or 30 people all at the same time. So then I could just walk away. And then they could learn to do it on their own, and it spread so easily, especially through Singapore back then.
So it's sort of like, okay, so I've watched videos of like, the Indian gurus who do like the Shakti part and they, like they touch. So it was something like that. And I think it's so interesting because you mentioned about how, I love what you said about the transmission versus resonance. And I think it's so easy for somebody to feel like, oh, I have the power to heal people now. And then the spiritual ego like gets in the way. And music became a way for you to like let go of that maybe. So I can see that. Thanks for sharing.
It feels clear to see it like super objectively. It's still easy to keep going back to transmission, but the fact that there are so many people who are going even deeper alone through the playlist systems that we've constructed that are used within clinical settings, family settings, parents who don't know anything about innerdance to take a playlist, play it to their child, and we are merely creating the conditions for the small boy or girl can go back to an original or natural state. There's no transmission there. That's pure resonance based on what is already inside to begin with.
Okay.
I like that. I like that question. We could go into that, especially nowadays.
Yeah, I think I'm done with my questions.
Okay, so I think this has been good. We recorded it, and this might be helpful for a lot of people as a starting point into playlisting. I'm hoping it's not too complex for others, but I'm really hoping that this is useful for you.
Yeah, it
Keep us
was.
updated and future calls just so we know the growth or learning curve. Because
Okay.
we're
So
gonna be
are you
pioneering
intending
this.
to host like more playlisting sessions like that one?
Oh,
You mentioned once
yeah.
a week, right?
I'm not sure how much we can do. I'm happy to create these as almost like laboratory studios so that, okay, I'm awake. Okay, who's out? Who's up?
Right.
Yeah, it could be anything like that where
Okay.
we could keep circling around and we could even regress so that some people advanced and then, okay, like some people are starting. Why not those who learned certain things? Why don't you teach them? And then we just keep learning like one big classroom.
Right. Okay.
It's like
I
it's
do have a
exciting.
question.
Sophie, yes.
Yes, they're awake, the children, so I can make some noise. Um, about a practical question, I'm really into live playlisting at the moment. An amazing tip Ahilan gave me that was that because I had a lot of glitches in my noise, the combination of the DJ Pro and the my noise. So he suggested to use another speaker for the my noise. I'm doing that. I'm going around with the my noise during the workshop, and it gives an extra layer. But I feel like I'm ready to do some more right now. So I was wondering if the Launchpad is a good option, a new option to add on extra layers with my DJ Pro and the My Noise, or do you think it's not necessary?
It's not going to work. Launchpad is not for DJ Pro or for my noise. It's not necessary. Launchpad is literally only for, it could be usable for maybe GarageBand, it could be usable. It could be usable for Logic Pro, most digital audio workstations, but they were not. Unless you mean the Launchpad app that you can download. Did you mean that?
The Launchpad, no, I wanted
hardware.
to, yes,
The hardware.
okay.
No, you can't use it. I think you might be able to use it for Launchpad, the app, but I don't even know. I think Gra might have tried it out. What you could study is, let's say you're, I still need to look at this, but I think if you have a tablet or a phone, but definitely a laptop, you can get a DJ machine. That's the nearest you can go to hardware that's applicable. You know what a
What's the
DJ?
name of the DJ machine?
No, wait a minute. Let me get one.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
There are just too many brands, but if you didn't want to work on your screens, then this can control like the volumes, speed. This particular one can play 4 songs at a time, which is synonymous with DJ Pro.
Yes.
But I've never used these. I mean, I tried to use them, but I actually got bored with them because my brain wanted more complexity. And I actually felt that the screens were easier somehow. And so I'm not sure if I recommend them. They were entry points for me, but it wasn't so sustainable. But if you were going to do hardware, it would be this. What I would suggest for you is maybe experiment with a small synthesizer.
Yes, yes. Okay.
That would be
Good.
more interesting because
Mhm.
you can sustain, let's say, a delta. You could come up with weird space noises. So I started out, my first synthesizer was let me see, and I hated that it actually broke down recently, but it's the NTS1 by Korg. It's weird because you have to build it yourself. It comes as a kit. You have to build it yourself. Johanna has this. I think Fanny and Ahilan had it. I've had two versions already, and then there's a new version that just came out. So it has these space. It creates these. It's called a space sense. So something so small, and then you can connect that to its own speaker, and we can cover how to use it maybe over the next. That's available in Singapore, Jeremy, in City Music. They carry Korg products.
Okay, thank you.
I think that would be more exciting. Mm. But don't get it right away. We can maybe in the next Zoom calls bring up other options, but then you would still loop into the same notion that you can actually just download a synthesizer app on a
Okay.
laptop or an iPad. But I really have fun with these in the sessions. So well, let's talk about it in another Zoom where we could demonstrate the simpler synthesizers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So is that it, Jeremy? Are we good? Okay. So it's 3:30 in Singapore and Manila. We started at 1. So we did 2.5 hours. It's quite big. Amazing. This is a big starting point. I would be interested in other facilitators even holding some of these conversations on apps, platforms. Okay, so thank you. If you could unmute, so even as a small group, we can say goodbye to everyone
bye.
watching this call. Thank you, everyone, too.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Bye. Bye.